Hello, my name is Prin, and I'm a summer intern working on the ARC project as well. And so thank you, Subin, for explaining what the ARC project is, and I'll just move straight into the next part. So my main contribution for this project is creating an interface that we call the O2 ARC interface. This interface was made to collect human solutions to ARC problems so that we can study the human logs and then gain more insight into how humans sort of reason and abstract things. This is what the interface currently looks like. You basically have a list of examples to infer the rule. Then you basically create an output grid from the input grid that's consistent with the rule shown in the examples. The key point of this interface is that it is object-oriented, meaning that you not only have cell-wise operations, but you can also select multiple cells and treat them as one object so that you can rotate an object, or you can flip an object, you can move an object around. And by doing this, we hope to gain richer logs that we can use to gain a better understanding of how humans think in an object-centric manner. So of course, with the logging interface, we also need a logging function. And for that, I sort of designed a JSON format for the logs. So a log consists of three parts. We have the task that the log is for. We have the user that's doing the task. And we have a sequence of actions which consists of multiple actions, and each action consists of the tool that the user is using, the parameter that's associated with the tool, the time between the previous and the current action, as well as whether or not they press submit and whether or not their submission was correct or not. And from these logs, we can create a state space graph where each node is the output grid, and each edge consists of the action that was taken, and it's also weighted by the time. The second thing that I did was I also helped in programming the interface for Happy RC Day. And I also helped with leading some sessions. Now, during this summer internship, I did learn a lot of things. Of course, there's like technical skills like reinforcement learning, graph learning, information theory. But I think these aren't very representative of the internship period, mostly because these are things that you could learn alone anyways. So I'd like to talk about what I learned by working on a big project from the start. Probably the most important part is about keeping the big picture in mind. And that's really important for our project because the ARC project is not really about solving the ARC dataset, although that is one of our goals. Instead, the ARC project is actually more about using the ARC dataset to focus our efforts on generalizing towards AGI. So with that in mind, I want to talk a little bit about what I've been working over past week and what I plan to do in the future. So the main thing that I'm planning on doing is studying about object parsing. So of course, object parsing also consists of taking a scene, or in our case, a grid, and then parsing them into foreground and background objects. But I'd also like to develop a measure to quantify the objectness of an object. For example, I'd like the measure to basically output similar numerical values for the three grids on the right-hand side, because they're very similar in terms of objectness. So last week, I started brainstorming some qualities that an object measure should have. So first, it should be robust to recoloring and super resolution. So what I mean is, like in the previous slide, we see that these three objects are similar. I want it to basically capture that. Next, I think a good objectness measure should capture the structure of an object. And finally, it should be influenced by the output as well. What do I mean by being influenced by the output? Well, here we have one single grid, but we have two different outputs, so two different rules. The top grid shows that the rule is a 90-degree rotation. So in this case, the object would be the 2x2 square. But if we have a different rule, like in the bottom grid, then we see that this object is actually composed of two different objects, the orange block and the gray block. So object parsing for us isn't just structure-oriented, it's also purpose-oriented. So that's what I mean when I say it should be influenced by the output. So to start off, I started by using a concept from information theory called entropy. Basically, I would like to take an object, and then we basically graph the color distribution of the object, and then calculate its entropy and use that as a starting measure for objectness. There's a couple good parts and a couple bad parts for using entropy. The good part is it's robust to recoloring and super resolution. So that satisfies the first criterion. The problem is it doesn't take structure into account. It also doesn't take the output into account. So a natural next step is to basically account for both of those. So I'd like to make the measure of objectness the entropy plus some sort of measure for structure plus some sort of measure for the input-output rule. And that's what I plan to do in the future. Okay, thank you.